Chapter 10 of Hard Times sees Dickens introduce Stephen Blackpool, and in the same way that the Gradgrind children are a microcosm of what utilitarianism does to children in Coketown, Stephen Blackpool's a microcosm of what it does to the workers there. Stephen Blackpool allows Dickens basically to zoom in on one of the hands who were treated not even as people, just as objects to do a job, and he shows us the very human cost of what utilitarianism can do. On page 65, about 7 or 8 lines down, we're told the lights in the great factories which looked when they were illuminated like fairy palaces. So there Dickens is playing around with a very childish, very innocent image and juxtaposing that with the factories and the reality of industrialism to again show how, the damage that industrialism, I guess, is doing. And we're told halfway down page 65 as Stephen Blackpool's waiting for Rachel, who is a companion really. He's married, but Rachel gives him some sort of comfort and some consolation, I guess. And we're told halfway down he knew Rachel well. For a glance at any one of these groups was sufficient to show him that she was not there. So again, Dickens contrasts the way that they're all just seen as hands and just as people who aren't even individuals, they're just a group, with how Stephen Blackpool sees Rachel as an individual. Okay, at the very end of Hard Times, Rachel does just blend into the crowd, and Dickens sort of picks her out right at the end when he looks into the future. But he's making the point that to each of these people, they are individuals, and utilitarianism might see them as just objects to do a job. But to them, they've all got their own lives and their own individual stories. About halfway down page 66 we see their language. So about halfway down we're told "'tis better not to walk too much together." Basically because Stephen's married and they don't want to create a scandal. Stephen doesn't want any scandal for Rachel basically. So the relationship stays very platonic. We see their style of speech, "'tis better," this Dickens writes in the way that they speak. He writes their sort of dialect down so we can hear that. To again show their difference to Bounderby and Gradgrind, who speak very easily and very properly. Their language is almost like Sleary is incorrect, sort of grammatically, but much more true for it. We're told just after that, "'tis hard anyways, Rachel, try not to think not, and 'twill seem better." So despite their language not being such correct, we get their intelligence that they're trying not to think because they understand the world too well almost. They understand its problems and its failings, and actually it gets them down, that they're seeing through it. Towards the bottom of page 66, about 6-7 lines up from the bottom, we have "Yes," he said, with a slow nod or two, "let 'em be, let everything be, let all sorts alone, 'tis a muddle and that's all." So we've got the slow nod, which is symbolic of Stephen's wisdom despite his style of speech. And he says "let 'em be, let everything be." Now, that's got a really important double meaning. At the time when Dickens was writing, laissez-faire was a big economic view, and that basically meant let things be. Okay, laissez-faire, the idea of laissez-faire was don't get involved, don't try and bring in strategies to end poverty, just let the wealth trickle down. Don't get involved, let everything happen and it'll all look after itself. Dickens didn't like this at all, he felt that this was really damaging for the working classes who were just sort of left in poverty in a very rich nation. But Stephen's version of "let it be" is very different. He sort of goes, well, just let things be natural, let things happen, don't get involved, which is very, very different. And over the course of Hard Times, Dickens takes the meaning of "let it be." It's a recurring motif, it's mentioned a lot through the book. Dickens takes it from something that represents laissez-faire to something that's much more what Stephen says, that just let the world happen, let children be children, don't get involved, don't interfere, don't be a Gradgrind and do that sort of rooting out of everything but facts. And I think that's what Hard Times is sort of all about, really. And that, when Stephen brings in "let it be" as that motif, and he says it for the first time, that's what it's all about. It's Dickens slowly changing the meaning from laissez-faire to just let things happen. And at the end of Hard Times, he says, "let these things be." Okay, let children be children, don't get involved. Dickens describes Stephen's wife about 8 or 9 lines down on page 68. We're told she's a creature so foul to look at in her tatters, stains and splashes, but so much fouler than that in a moral infamy that it was a shameful thing even to see her. So Dickens creates this real opposition here between Stephen, who nods slowly, who's wise, and his wife, who's it's almost unrealistic. She's almost a caricature, isn't she? This dirty, ragged woman who is also very, very evil. Dickens is really sort of exaggerating that to represent Stephen's goodness by comparison and Rachel's goodness by comparison. And we're told at the end of the chapter that Stephen, it was to throw a covering over her as if his hands were not enough to hide her, even in the darkness. Okay, so again, whereas Sissy brings in sunlight and Stephen at the end looks up at the stars and at the moon and they guide him, this woman represents darkness, okay, and just needs to be covered, representing Stephen's shame and the past. She also represents Stephen's lost youth. You know, he married her and now he has no chance of a relationship with Rachel, no chance of a future really, because he's bound to this woman. So she's described so, you know, in such an exaggerated way, because in terms of childhood, which is what you need to talk about for this exam, she represents the loss of childhood. She has taken Stephen and Rachel's youth away from them and therefore is totally evil, in much the same way as Paul Marshall is presented as totally evil in Atonement by Bryony, because again he represents to her that loss of innocence and that loss of childhood, and therefore can only ever be this almost pantomime exaggerated villain. Okay, so that's chapter 10.